Six Nations 2023, folks, is pretty much here. The first game is the Welsh hosting the Irish. We're going to go through the lineups and some predictions and whatnot, and you guys can let us know your thoughts on how this one may begin to pan out. But certainly we've been a while without test match rugby, so it's a good time to be a rugby fan, albeit we're due for a pretty early wake-up call for those of us here in my part of the world, New Zealand. Wales and Ireland in kind of different positions at the moment, right? With Ireland flying high, the number one ranked side in the world, Wales down in 9th, and having replaced former coach Wayne Pivac with the former coach Warren Gatland. So Gats is back, and I feel like expectations are at least moderately high for the Welsh. I don't think they're kind of expecting themselves to go and do like a 2019 World Cup year Grand Slam thing or anything, but certainly they're expecting to see a bit of improvement compared to what we saw from Wayne's boys last year. For the Irish, I think they absolutely need to kick on, and Andy Farrell would love to get himself a Six Nations trophy right before we head into a World Cup in just over 6 months' time. So the Welsh lineup is certainly pretty experienced. If we start with the home side, I mean, Gareth, Tomas, Ken Owens and Tom Francis, that's relatively steady as she goes. Ken Owens is captain. And it's one of those few times where I feel like when he was announced as the new captain, there wasn't a heck of a lot of negative feedback. You know, it's always a bit of a interesting call as to who gets picked as captain. I know here in New Zealand we are certainly very critical of our own captain. But nobody really that I saw was too upset with the Sheriff being captain. So, the front row is going to have a big job ahead of them, but I'm sure they will be prepped for the onslaught of that Irish front row, although they are without one of their big-name guys as well. Adam Baird and Alun Jones is the second row. Now, Alun Wyn's been copping a lot of stick. A lot of, I'm assuming, non-Ospreys fans concerned that he might be a little bit too old and that there should be other locking options in Wales, but I don't know. I'm a stats guy, and every time I look at Alun Wyn's performance numbers in terms of his work rate, I don't think he's doing a bad job. So, that's just what it's worth. I mean, Adam Baird's a big unit as well, so I think they can kind of complement each other well. The back row of Jack Morgan, Justin Tipuric and Taulupe Faletau is pretty exciting. The Welsh, I've gone on and on about it before, but always seem to produce pretty bloody classy back rowers. Jack Morgan, you had to have him in the squad somewhere based on his performances last year. Certainly a real dynamic ball carrier. Speaking of work rate, he's right up there. Gets himself involved with a bit of everything. Justin Tipuric, certainly going to be one of your biggest threats at the breakdown, although he is one of a number of guys, I guess, in this Welsh 23 who is, getting on a wee bit. There's a few of them in the squad, not just Alun Wyn. And then Taulupe Faletau was just doing Taulupe Faletau magic last year, wasn't he? Even when Wales didn't look that good, Faletau still managed to get through either the most tackles or get the most meters of any Welsh forward and get crazy offloads going. So he just genuinely does a bit of everything, no matter how the team seems to be playing. Backline's a little bit more interesting with, Tom Francis and Dan Biggar, 9-10. There's no real huge surprises there. It's good to see Biggar fit after missing the end of last year for Wales. And then Joe Hawkins and George North is maybe a slightly surprising one, with Hawkins being put into the 12 jersey by Gats. I mean, Gats kind of singled him out when he was asked about it, of course, in the press conference, just saying he was good against Australia, he's a really tidy footballer, and he sees him as a guy who could potentially transition to the number 10 jersey one of these days. So clearly he's looking at using that kind of playmaking set that Hawkins brings to the game. And George North is a big unit outside him, very experienced. Dan Biggar, experienced. So Joe Hawkins is certainly, I guess if you can call it being eased into a test against the number one ranked Ireland side, he's certainly got some experience either side of him, so that's going to hold him in good stead. Rio Dyer and Josh Adams on the wings, and then Liam Williams is late call-up to fullback. Initially they named Lee Halfpenny, but when they were talking about Lee Halfpenny in the press conference, apparently he had a bit of a tight hip. He wasn't participating fully in training, and then he seems to have not passed whatever fitness test they've run on him. So it is Liam Williams, who's coming back from a finger injury, I believe. So it's kind of a late change for Gats's boys. So like I mentioned, there's a lot of guys in this Welsh squad who are, proper veterans. I mean, Liam Williams has been around the block, hasn't he? George North, hey, how many caps has he got? He'll be in the 90s, surely. Dan Biggar, Taulupe, Faletau, Tipuric, Alun. I mean, even Adam Beard's cranking up the caps now, isn't he? The Sheriff. So, yeah, there's a lot of experience in the Welsh squad, and it's kind of not surprising for Gats to go with some familiar faces, but then also Joe Hawkins is a guy who got his debut under Pivac, so yeah, he's also kind of willing to spread things around a little bit. The bench is Baldwin, Carre, and Lewis. Dafydd, Jenkins is another kind of promising one. I think Gats kind of alluded to the fact that he wants Alun just to go gangbusters for half the game, and then Dafydd Jenkins is going to come on. Tommy Reffell, who's kind of unlucky, man. I mean, that's just how competitive it is in the back row with Wells that Reffell's on the bench. Rhys Webb sees a bit of favour with Gats coming back in after seemingly being on the outer with Pivac. Owen Williams and then Alex Cuthbert as well. Rhys Sammett's obviously injured, so I think he would probably be in the 23 if not for that. Chiunza is also injured, which is an unfortunate one because I feel like Gats could get some good value out of Chiunza, but not fit, so not selected. So that's the Welsh squad. Experienced, familiar, but with a little bit of experimental touches to it as well. For the Irish, if you ever looked at the depth chart videos with Andy Farrell, you'll know Andy Farrell likes to pick a consistent 15 and a consistent 23, and we pretty much see that with this selection. The biggest omission is clearly Tyg Furlong. So Andrew Porter, Dan Sheehan, and Finlay Bealham. So Finlay Bealham gets a start at tight head, which is pleasing for him because I think he's coming along pretty nicely. He's obviously constantly living in this shadow, a big shadow it is, of Tyg Furlong, but Tyg Furlong being not fit means Bealham gets a chance to start away in Wales, which is a great test for him. So if he's going to step up, and I think he has been stepping up, but if he's going to step up again at test level and he gets a start, it's pretty rare for him. He needs to take this opportunity. So pretty pleased for him. I mean, Farrell basically said that Furlong's not quite ready. He seems to be confident that he's going to be ready for France, but he's not ready for Wales. And I'm sure it's one of those ones where maybe if it's like a World Cup, whatever game, you give them an injection and let them play, but there's no point risking him. So Finlay Bealham's your guy. I think I read something about Ronan Kelleher not being 100% fit either as well. So Dan Sheehan resumes his role as the starting number 2 guy for Ireland, and I'm certainly not complaining because that guy it's not the thing you're supposed to be that excited about when watching the hooker play, but the way Dan Sheehan gets around the park is just phenomenal to watch. So, pleased for him to keep on going. Tyke Byrne, James Ryan is proving to be a pretty consistent now and useful lock-in duo. There was a bit of talk about whether once Hendo was back fit that he would impose himself by coming straight back into the second row, but he is there on the bench. Peter Romani, Josh van der Fleer, and Caelan Doris. Again, it's a pretty familiar back row. I do think they complement each other well. They can obviously all do a bit of everything, but I mean, you got to love Peter Romani's line-out defence. You got to love Josh van der Fleer's absolute work rate and his ball carrying. Did a video about that guy with his increased ball carrying, and then Caelan Doris with those big legs of his to crank through some meters. So I think you'd be pretty happy with that, and it's pretty familiar. There's no real surprises there from the Irish forward pack, as I said, apart from Furlong being injured. The backs, Gibson-Park and Sexton, so that's your 9-10. Unlike Alun Wyn-Jones, Sexton, I guess it's because you're winning. Sexton gets grief whenever Ireland have a bad game, I guess. But no, when Ireland are doing well, nobody complains about them. So same with Wales. When Wales are doing well, not many people were saying Alun Wyn was too old. They're pretty much the same age, I think. So I think most of us still think Sexton makes Ireland look a pretty tidy side. So I haven't heard any complaints about Sexton getting the starting gig. I think it's pretty much a foregone conclusion, especially with him as captain. And I am pleased for Ross Byrne on the bench, though. I'll be keen to see how many minutes he gets. It may depend on the way the game is flowing. Midfield, McCloskey and Ringrose. I'm very pleased. I mean, Ringrose has been playing out of his skin this year, but I'm pleased for McCloskey to get a go at test level, and they kind of singled him out at the press conference as well, with Farrell saying that he's got more to offer at this level. He's another guy that doesn't get that many starts, with how competitive the Irish midfield is, but pleased for him. Hope he has a good game. And Mack Hansen, James Lowe on the wings, that's pretty familiar with Hugo Keenan ever kind of present at the back, so we can expect to see some big old boots from James Lowe. Hugo Keenan very secure under the high ball. So yeah, man, as I said, this is pretty much the team that we always expect our Andy Farrell to pick in recent times, barring a few guys who have come in with some of the potential former regulars like Furlong and Henshaw and whatnot being unavailable through injury. Aki is maybe one guy who would normally maybe start, but I'm pleased for McCloskey, like I said. Aki is there on the bench alongside Ross Byrne and Connor Murray. Those are your back replacements. Jack Conan, Ian Henderson, Tom O'Toole, Kian Healy, and Rob Herring, the forward. So, yeah, there's a fair bit of depth in the Irish squad, a fair bit of experience. Well, I talked about the Welsh experience. I mean, guys like Henderson and Healy, that's a lot of caps being on the bench. Connor Murray as well. So, yeah. Both these sides, I reckon, look pretty good, despite the fact that it's number 1 against number 9. I do think it could be a pretty interesting one. The recent history between the sides largely goes Ireland's way. I got that on the board. 4 wins out of the last 5 go to Ireland. However, those 4 games were all played in Dublin. The one game played in Cardiff is the one Welsh win, and that's back in the 2021 Six Nations, where Wales won 21-16. The most recent one is that 29-7 result, where Ireland absolutely put the Welsh to the sword. That was, well, I know Wales had some bad games last year, but that was a pretty rough one. It could have been a lot worse. I mean, you remember Wales were getting hammered with the penalties. They conceded like 15 or so penalties. Ireland, I think less than 5 or so. It was really lopsided. Ireland had all the possession. The one try the Welsh scored was kind of Tane Basham with a little bit of a poach at the breakdown, and he just kind of got clean through. But it was a bad game from a Welsh point of view, and Ireland. I mean, they would have been a bit disappointed not to have scored more points in that game. However, as I said, it was in Dublin. The recent history between these sides, especially in the Six Nations, tends to be whoever is at home is the winner. I mean, Ireland, I think, have beaten Wales and Cardiff in the 2019 Rugby World Cup warm-up games. That's relatively recent, but if you're talking Six Nations, I think you've got to go back to like 2013 to see a Irish win in Cardiff. So, yeah, it's not a factor you can discount. The roof is going to be closed for this one, so it should be, I don't know, man, it should be a pretty entertaining game. Predictions-wise, the bookies have got Ireland by 5 points, which is maybe taking into account a bit of that home advantage, and Ireland with the Rugby Forecast algorithm are by 12. So 12 is interesting because if you're looking at the average score across the last 5 games, it's 24-12 to Ireland, so it's about a 12-point margin. But like I mentioned, the home and away thing, I do think, is a factor. So, yeah, you guys let us know your thoughts. Remember, it is on Saturday at the Principality. It's at 2:15. It's in the afternoon for you guys in the UK. It's a 3:15 in the morning kickoff, I believe, for those of us in New Zealand. So it is on the BBC. If you guys are outside free-to-air countries, you can watch on the BBC using a VPN. I'll put a link down in the description to Express. It's the one I use if I want to jump on BBC or ITV. ITV's got the coverage of the World Cup this year as well, so VPNs are looking like a pretty useful tool. But Carl Dixon is the ref. Carl Dixon is one that sometimes I feel like goes a little bit maverick compared to some of the way the other refs ref the game, but we will see. Hopefully we're not talking about him too much at the end. But anyway, you guys let us know your thoughts. You think Ireland with their number 1 ranking are going to be too good for what was a pretty poor Welsh side last year, or do you think the Gats factor, the home factor, is going to see Wales through? You guys let us know your thoughts, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.